Sometimes these will be positive and will actually help our communication, but other things will be negative and they will act like barriers to effective communication.
Would it be too impolite for me to ask for an earlier date? Shh.
We want to look now at 4 common barriers and how we can get round these. The first is insufficient time.
We have to set aside time for meaningful conversation on a regular basis, time that works and is good for both of us. That is perhaps the best investment we can make for our relationship.
And we have to plan this sort of time into our lives. It doesn't just happen. Planned time together prevents a backlog of non-communication or miscommunication.
We're going to be talking in the next session about how to make sure we plan sufficient time for effective communication between us.
There are some moments, however, that can't be planned, when we have to drop everything and listen to our partner.
Failing to make time to talk together is the first barrier to good communication.
The second barrier is failing to talk about our feelings.
There's a danger in marriage of communicating only about the practical things or talking only at the most superficial level. Oh no, it's raining again, or the trains seem to get less and less reliable, or would you like me to go to the shops or shall we go together?
Being open with each other and sharing our innermost thoughts is essential if we're to build a strong marriage.
I definitely found it difficult to express my feelings, especially early on in marriage. I realised that my parents have not been a good sort of example of it. They don't express their feelings very well. And it took me a while to actually even understand what I was feeling and then to have the time and the opportunity to talk to Jules about it. And I suppose what we've done, and Jules has been brilliant in asking me questions to enable me to speak about my feelings, and I've had to sort of be bold and brave to actually say, this is what I feel, Jules. Yeah. And so we're learning, but I think I'm getting a lot better.
There are a number of different reasons why we may find it difficult to communicate at the level of our feelings. Perhaps we feel inadequate and think to ourselves, if you knew what I was really like, you might not like me.
Or we feel vulnerable and think, if I told you my real feelings, I'm afraid you might laugh at me or reject me. Or we're fearful and think, if I told you why I'm worried or why I feel hurt, you'd get angry.
In the marriage book, we tell the story of James and Anna, who rescued their marriage from the brink of divorce. The main reason they gave for their problems was ineffective communication. This is what James wrote to us. Effective communication must mean revealing all parts of our lives. In my case, the parts which I'm well practiced at keeping hidden. For me, at least, it requires more than time. It requires courage.
If you're like James and find talking about your feelings difficult, we want to encourage you to dare to trust your fiancé and to start disclosing your feelings to him or her. We'll only do that, even to our husband or wife, if we feel accepted. So, if you know that your partner struggles to express their feelings, be sure to listen to them without judging or criticising, because it may well have taken great courage for them to disclose personal things.
We want to introduce you now to Paul and Jules. They met as students when they were both in the college boat club, but admit they haven't been in a boat together since they got married.
Well, Paul and Jules, welcome. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Now, tell us, first of all, are there big differences in the way in which you communicate?
I think the definite answer to that is yes. I'm a talker, and Julia, whether through choice or necessity, is a listener.
But that's not something that's necessarily the case all the time. I talk a lot to my friends, and in big groups I'm quite a talkative person, but just the dynamic between us tends to be more that Paul is talking and I'm listening.
Yeah.
And do you think that your family backgrounds have affected the way that you communicate?
Yeah, I'd say definitely. My family is very quiet, quite placid, very relaxed, and they take things very gently. And if we're having a discussion around the table, everyone will take their turn, pause, think about what people have said. It's all very sedate. Whereas the first time I met Paul's family, I sat around the table for dinner with them and I just couldn't get a word in edgeways. I found it quite scary because they really go for their conversations. They get very passionate and very fired up. So we're quite different in that sense.
And are those differences exaggerated by your personality, would you say, Paul?
I think so. I mean, you take your personality from your family to a large extent, I think. So I used to get very frustrated with Julia when we were trying to have a conversation, and I would ask her a direct question, and there'd be a huge long pause afterwards, which I used to think she was doing deliberately. In my family, you're lucky to get to the end of your question before they just jump in there. So.
Yeah.
So what have you had to learn to communicate effectively, do you think?
I think I've had to learn that so that Paul doesn't get frustrated with me and so that we have a very balanced conversation, that it's important for me to be able to articulate my feelings a little bit quicker, to express them and to put them in the conversation when they occur. And I think you've had to learn to listen a bit more, haven't you?
Yeah, that's been very challenging for me because I get very excited when we're having a debate anyway, but if nothing's coming back, I get even more, agitated really. So it has been very challenging, but I've had to really learn just to shut up and listen. I mean, I really have to bite my lip sometimes. It's not so bad now, but at the start it was a big challenge.
Right.
Now, have you found that there are really good times for communicating, or sort of times that you have to avoid for communicating?
The definite times to avoid.
Yeah, I think we talk we're very open and honest with each other. We don't have any sort of problems talking through things, but for some reason I can get very comfortable just with talking about things as we're going to sleep. I'm very sort of laid back and very happy. I feel very much in love, very secure. And I suddenly say, just as I was about to drop off to sleep, "Oh, Paul, what do you think about this?" And he goes, "Oh, not now." So bad time to discuss things.
Two sides to every coin though, because I usually end up having a big debate when we're driving, and when Julia's trying to navigate us through central London, I'm kind of dealing with major issues. So.
And I'm trying to read the map at the same time. So I think it's good to just have a set-aside time.
So those are bad times, and what are the sort of times you set aside? What are the good times?
I think when we come home in the evening, it's really nice to spend some time together where we can just like focus on each other and put the day aside and see what we've both been up to. And before we have our dinner or over dinner, that's a nice time for us.
Yeah, over a meal is good.
Now, if there was one tip you would want to pass on to the engaged couples, what would that be?
I think that if one thing that I was thinking about when we were engaged was that when you get married, you become almost like one person. If you think you become like a united front, then if that one person is going to be almost created between you, then it's a good idea to put the best parts of yourself into the half of that person that you're creating, and not to put the cantankerous or argumentative sides of yourself into that person. I think that's a good idea.
And Jules, what about you?
Somebody gave us this piece of advice before we got married, and we found it very important, is never to let the sun go down on your wrath, and just always to put things aside and not to let them drag on or cause any problems. And so there's never any tarnishing on our relationship. We always start and finish every day very much in love and not with any sort of bad feeling between us.
Well, Paul and Jules, thank you so much for joining us and for passing on all that wisdom.
We want you to turn to the next exercise in your manual called Effective Talking. We're going to give you an opportunity to ask your fiancé how difficult or easy it is for them to talk about their inner thoughts, attitudes and emotions. Find out if they were encouraged to talk about their feelings during their upbringing. And we're going to give you 10 minutes to do this.
We want to go on now to look at a third barrier to effective communication, which is holding on to hurt and resentment. Resentment is a negative emotion which can be stored up and left to fester for hours, days, or even over years. And if this becomes a habit, it can lead to a complete breakdown in communication.
When we first got married, my way of dealing with being misunderstood or hurt was to shout at Nikki and then go into a sulk. And I can tell you they were quite bad sulks. It wasn't very nice for Nikki, and our communication really suffered. My mood affected everything.
Sometimes Scylla's mood would last for a day, sometimes for 48 hours, or even longer. And there was nothing I could do to make things better.
I learned that I had to deal with this way of behaving, and instead of secretly sulking, I realised I had to be open with Nicky and tell him why I was feeling so resentful.
Knowing why Scylla was upset really helped me. We could then discuss the issue, and I could apologise if I'd hurt her without realising it.
Once I knew that Nicky would listen and try to understand why I was feeling upset, I found that my resentment went away and I didn't need to sulk anymore. And this made a big difference. We're going to be looking more at the importance of talking about hurt and the whole process of forgiveness in session 3.
But now we want to move on and look at the fourth and final barrier to effective communication, which is failing to listen to each other. Listening is of huge importance, as we heard from Paul and Jules earlier, not only if we're to communicate effectively, but also in building a foundation of understanding and intimacy in our marriage.
A relationship counsellor, Gerard Hughes, said this: "The gift of being a good listener, a gift which requires constant practice, is perhaps the most healing gift anyone can possess. It doesn't judge or advise the other, but communicates support at a level deeper than words."
Just think for a moment what it feels like when you're listened to. For me, I feel valued, understood, loved, supported.
Now think, what does it feel like when you're not listened to? It makes me feel frustrated, ignored, taken for granted, or even rejected.
Not being listened to is highly damaging to a relationship. But equally, being a good listener is very difficult because it's costly. It demands our time and our patience. Stephen Covey, author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, once said, "This means not just listening with your ears, but also, more importantly, listening with your eyes and your heart, listening for feeling, for meaning."
Most of us have some bad listening habits to overcome, such as interrupting our partner when they're in full flow, or maybe going off at a tangent with a story of our own, or giving advice instead of empathy. As someone who is not naturally a good listener, I am quite likely to do all 3, and probably some others as well. But I don't think I'm the only one to do more talking than listening.
I have quite a few bad habits in communicating. I think probably my classic worst one is trying to say something important whilst being in a completely different room, or washing up, or cooking. And I realised early on in marriage that if something was worth saying, it was worth stopping, sitting down and speaking properly to Eric. My other classic bad habit is interrupting. I get a little enthusiastic and start putting words in Eric's mouth. So that's mine.
I think my bad habits are just that it's just really listening, actually. Being able to listen to what Jules is trying to say and not trying to problem solve. You know, I'll solve the problem straight away rather than letting Jules just say what she's feeling. I'll get in there, sort it out, and it'll be over. Don't worry about it.
Whatever our bad habits, they will have a negative impact on our relationship.
But the good news is, effective listening is something we can all learn and practice. It means putting aside our own agenda and seeing the world through our fiancé's eyes and making the effort to understand them when they think or feel differently to us. Even the worst listeners among us can change.
I'm a terrible listener. I give advice, I interrupt, I have patience for about 14 seconds. But I actually learned how to listen to Deb. I just listen, I don't say anything, don't give her any advice, and she works it all out for herself. It's amazing.
And I think the big thing is that we do tell each other when we want the other one to listen to us. Because, you know, you're busy all the time, you're rushing around, and so sometimes I just say, Miles, I just want you to sit down and I want you to listen to me, and you do, and it really works.
Yep. And you listen to me very well, fantastically. You have to, a lot, yes.
In a moment, we're going to get you to practice listening to each other. But first, Nicky and I are going to have a conversation in front of you to try to demonstrate what effective listening looks like and sounds like.
I'm going to tell Scylla something that's bothering me. And we're going to use a technique that will help to show me she's listening, seeking to understand me and to empathise with me. Of course, that can be hard for any of us to do if I'm telling her something about her own behaviour. We all desperately want to justify ourselves rather than try to see it from our partner's point of view. And we don't learn this kind of listening overnight. It takes a lot of practice.
I have absolutely no idea what Nicky's going to talk to me about. This is not rehearsed. When he's told me, I'm going to try to reflect back what he said. That is, repeat back to him what he's told me, particularly any feelings that he's expressed. If I haven't understood properly, he'll tell me again. Then I'm going to ask him, what's concerning you most about what you've just told me? Then I'll listen and repeat back to him again. Then I'm going to ask him, is there anything that you could do, or if it's appropriate, you'd like me or us to do about what you've just said? Then I'll listen and reflect back again. And finally, I'm going to ask him, is there anything else that you'd like to say? So, Nicky, what's the issue that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I wanted to talk about times when we're driving in the car. Actually, more specifically, when I'm driving. And I suppose over the years we've probably had our most futile arguments in the car. And I know that there are times when I don't know the way and I have to ask you for directions, and that's great. But there are other times when I think I do know the way, and when you sort of tell me that you think your way is better, I feel, well, I sort of feel rather undermined and actually upset. I mean, I don't think I express it really very much, but actually it makes me feel you don't trust the way that I want to go. And I think over the years, actually, when we've had people in the car, when our children were younger, when they were with us, I felt rather undermined by your never sort of trusting that my way might perhaps be better.
Okay, so the issue is about when we're in the car and when we're going somewhere in the car, and you think that over the years we've probably had some of our most futile arguments in the car, and it's usually about the sort of me giving you directions. Obviously, sometimes you don't know the way and you need me to give you directions, but sometimes you know the way and you don't want me telling you how to go. And it's when I give you those directions, when you do actually know the way, that it makes you feel kind of quite undermined. It's as if I don't trust you. Yeah. And particularly when there are other people in the car, like when, you know, our children were younger and it was in front of them and I'd be going on and you felt particularly undermined and, yeah, what was the other thing you said? Undermined and... Well,
and upset. I don't
yes.
express usually when I'm upset, but it does upset me that, you know, you don't trust that I might know the best way to go.
So it's the upset, you get upset.
Yeah.
Really, it's that I might not trust you knowing the right way to go. And out of all of that, what's concerning you most about what you've said, really? What's at the heart of it?
I think it's that I feel you don't give me credit for the fact I might sometimes know a better way. So that I think what's most important is that, you know, you don't sort of allow me sometimes to go the way that I want to go. Or if I do go the way I want to go, that you attack me.
So you feel that I don't give you credit for knowing the way that we're going. And even if I do, or sort of if I tell you which way to go, you just feel that I'm attacking you. Is that right?
Yeah, I think just that.
And so what do you think that you could do about this situation? Or perhaps it's more like, what could I do about this situation?
Well, I was thinking about it, and I wonder if we could have an agreement that whoever of us is driving is the final arbiter, makes the final decision. And certainly, I'm sure I will ask you for advice as to which way to go. But when I'm driving, I'd love to have the final decision. And when you're driving, then you have the final decision.
Okay, so you feel it'd be really good if we made a kind of agreement that whoever's driving has the final decision about which way we're going. So if you're driving, you can make the final decision and go your way, and if I'm driving, then I can do the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
So is there anything else that you want to say?
Well, I suppose I do feel it's a bit silly waiting 28 years to talk to you about this. But probably, well, we could work on it for the coming years. Anyway, that's all right.
Okay, so you think it's a pity we waited 28 years to talk about it like this and for you to tell me what you feel about it, but we can work on it from now on.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fine.
Well, I love doing this exercise because I know that Scylla's going to have to listen to me. But don't worry, I will give Scylla a chance to have her say later. Now it's your turn, and you'll see the instructions in your manual for the exercise that's called effective listening. And what we want you to do is to take this time to listen to each other about something that's clearly important for your fiancé, but it may not be for you. And this is a good opportunity to practice expressing your feelings if you're not used to doing so.
It could be to do with the arrangements for your wedding or something else that you're worried about. And we're going to give you 15 minutes. Make sure you both have an opportunity to talk and to listen.
You'll see that we put some homework in the manual after each session. But don't worry, it's not the sort that's taken in and marked. It's designed to help you to follow up the topic of each session.
And we'll finish each session by hearing one of the passages suggested in the back of the manual as a possible reading for your marriage service. This session, we're going to hear Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 to 17.
Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body, you were called to peace, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom, and as you sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him.
Finally, I'd like to close this session with a short prayer. Lord, thank you that you're the God of love. We thank you that you're always listening to us. Please help us to put on love and to be good at listening to each other. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
That's all for this session, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.